What went wrong during the extreme heat wave that killed more than 100 people across Oregon? One failure was getting people information about cooling centers through the 211 system.
Unfortunately, people have died that potentially didn't need to.
I thought and hoped these services would be working when we had a life-threatening heat wave.
And I'm sure you've heard a lot about the dreaded Delta variant circling the U.S. And one of you wanted to know, how prevalent is it in Oregon? Turns out, not very, at least not yet. Here's the story.
And I'm Dan Haggerty. Thank you for being with us. It is a Thursday. I appreciate you tuning in. Welcome to the story. So let's just get right into it tonight. Maybe you will disagree with what I have to say. Maybe you'll agree. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, whatever they are. Use the stuff you got at the bottom of your screen here, that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Email us at thestory@kgw.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and all that. And let me get right into it here. So we know at this point that 116 people have died from the heat wave in Oregon. And that number may still go up a few more. We of course hope that it does not. Now, we've been paying particular attention to this tragedy since the first deaths were announced. And coincidentally, that was on a day that was supposed to be, I don't want to call it a celebration, but it was supposed to be this relief for people, because that's when the state was reopening, you remember? And we had a big show planned for that day, all about the reopening. In fact, we had already gone out and recorded most of it, but decided to scrap the whole thing, all the stuff we had worked on, because we believe that these heat deaths that were announced that afternoon were unquestionably a bigger story. So the next day, I have access to data, kind of the ratings and stuff, and I looked at the top stories on our website to see what people were clicking on and what they were reading, and it kind of opened my eyes. See, first, by a huge margin, the number one story, and pretty understandably, was a story about the reopening and the mask mandate going away. Next was a story about the ban on fireworks. And third, a very distant third, with about 1/5 of the clicks, was the death toll from the heat. It had about the same amount of web traffic from an older second story about face masks. I got on Twitter after that, and I didn't see a whole lot of tweets, or really any tweets, about these tragic deaths from some of our community leaders. We didn't have any statements from politicians in our inbox considering offering condolences to the families. I didn't see any activists screaming from the rooftops about the inequalities that heavily determined who died and who didn't. And I'm sure people did. I'm sure people tweeted about it, and I just didn't see it. But this horrendous thing, it just wasn't unfolding with that unavoidable social outcry that we typically see in a community that is very familiar with that type of noise. So the next day, we decided to make most of our show, to dedicate it to explaining what happened and why you should care, why it affected the people it did. And we pressed our leaders to comment on it, and to give everybody confidence that it won't happen again. And John emailed me and said, in part, "We watched your rant tonight regarding people dying from the heat. You blamed everyone, but had no solutions." He also said, "So, unlike you, I was impressed with the efforts of our various governments and volunteers," and ended with, "So yes, we can do more and people will react better next time, but let's stop with the rants and blame of our leaders who responded well and tried to save lives." So John, thank you for the email. I appreciate it. And I get these types of messages like John's a lot when we critique elected leaders or we question their decisions. And I'll start by saying, I'm not blaming them. I'm looking to them. Do you see what I mean? My dad used to use this example when he tried to explain leadership to me when I was young. He was a football coach, so we used a lot of football analogies. But he said, listen to a great quarterback after a game. When they win, the QB credits everybody else. He says, "We had guys out there making great plays today. Hey, I can't throw touchdowns unless somebody's out there to catch them. Or the O-line gave me a lot of time back there to make the winning throw. This was a team win." But when that same quarterback, a great quarterback, loses a game, what's he say? He doesn't bring up guys who drop passes. He doesn't talk about the multiple sacks. He says, "I didn't do enough to get it done today. This one's on me." That is how, in my opinion, a leader leads, one of the ways. So please, don't feel bad for our elected officials when we talk about accountability. It is part of their job. And frankly, the good leaders don't just expect that burden. They choose to be the rare people among us who actually want it. Now, that doesn't make it easy, John, or anybody else who shares a similar opinion. Look, I much prefer the emails that agree with me. But it'd be pretty silly for someone who chose this line of work to think everyone will. Now, let's get to the big story. And that's what went wrong with 211. Maybe the most glaring misstep that we've seen so far during the heat wave. The whole point of calling 211 is because you need help, right? But hundreds of people who called that line couldn't get through. And by the time the people in charge realized that there was a problem, the heat wave was upon us. Here's Kristen Severance.
I thought and hoped these services would be working when we had a life-threatening heat wave.
With no AC in his Portland home, Nathan Williams stayed at a hotel in the Lloyd district during Oregon's historic heat wave. He noticed right away many others did not have that option. He spent Saturday and Sunday checking on people, many who were living on the street and handing out waters.
And I saw one gentleman who seemed to be, struggling in the heat. It wasn't quite an emergency 911 situation, so I called 211. I was surprised to find that there was no way to get a human on the line, or no way I could find, and there was no information about the heat wave at all. It was as if the recording was from a month ago.
Williams had seen Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler and other officials tout 211 as a place to get information during the heat wave. 211 is a nonprofit that is supposed to connect people with services. He called 211 several times on Saturday and again on Sunday when he ran into another man who needed a ride to the Oregon Convention Center, one of Multnomah County's 3 cooling centers.
And I called 211 early in the morning, I called it in the mid-morning, I called it late morning, and it was the same thing. It was this kind of endless loop of menu options that had nothing to do with the heat wave. And the best I could tell, there was no way to get a live person.
Williams is right. When people called 211 on Saturday and into Sunday during the heat wave, there was no option to talk to someone about cooling centers. And if you pressed the option for all other services, you were told 211 was closed for the weekend. Dan Herman is 211's CEO.
It could have gone more smoothly. We are part of a network with partners. I feel like we could have held up our end of the bargain better, and we've learned from that.
At the end of the day, who dropped the ball when deciding not to include that in the prompt, not moving the cooling center information higher? Who is to blame?
The organization 211 will take some responsibility. Absolutely.
It also took until Sunday afternoon to change the phone tree options, bring in more staff, and expand hours at 211. The Oregon Department of Human Services, who paid for the extra staff at 211, told KGW, 211 not being staffed on the weekends was not known to us until late Saturday afternoon. Early Sunday afternoon, we had an agreement with 211 to pay for staffing for the line until 11 p.m. through Tuesday. Senior advocates like Mary Rita Hurley, chair of the Governor's Commission on Senior Services, said the whole thing is very frustrating.
Hard to know when, you've got DHS stated they didn't know that 211 wasn't manned on weekends. Why don't they know that? So, and then when they did find that out, and they scrambled and they got funding, they didn't get the funding until 2:00 on Sunday. Well, we're a day and a half into this crisis, and for a lot of people, it was too late.
Herman said until now, 211 has been reactive instead of proactive, but that may be changing.
So one of our process improvements is we are going to have discussions with partners, both local and state, that says maybe we don't wait. Maybe the default is conditions. For instance, when we see conditions and heat exceeding 100 degrees, we activate. We're not going to wait for the word from partners.
There are some other big changes on the way to 211. Starting Monday, 211 services will be 24/7. They are changing the phone tree to include information about the specific emergency happening. They are considering having a live person answer during emergencies and updating their website. While 211 did connect some people with services and rides, we know at least 750 people called 211 Saturday and gave up after hearing the prompts.
But any missed call, any inability to take care of somebody that was suffering from those horrific conditions, That's not right. And that's why we're making process improvements now and staffing 24/7 to get better, to get that right.
Kristen Severance, KGW News.
Now, I want to show you this map again of where we know people did die from the heat in Multnomah County. Now, the darker the color there, the more people who died in that specific zip code. And you can see more deaths happen in southeast Portland, which are some of the poorer areas in the city. Right now, officials aren't releasing the exact addresses of where people died. But we do know 3 deaths happened in properties owned by Home Forward, which is the largest provider of affordable housing in Oregon. 2 of those deaths happened in high-rise apartment buildings without central air conditioning. In fact, only one of Home Forward's 72 buildings has central air. And even after this extreme heat, the agency's executive director told our Pat Doris they have no plans to install central AC in any other buildings.
Why not come forward and demand that the federal government, state and local governments who have huge budgets this year supply enough money for retrofitting for central air conditioning? Some of these apartments are 13 stories tall and there's no air conditioning. How can people be expected to stay there, for the next heat wave?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's an important question. And, it harkens to my earlier answer about the exercise we have to go through in terms of figuring out, all of the possible disaster scenarios that we have to prepare for and what investment is required to do that.
Now, you heard him mention other possible disasters, and right now Home Forward is actually retrofitting its buildings to withstand earthquakes. And they don't have enough money to do that and also install central air. But a lot of people want them to, including the union that represents home health care workers in Oregon who often visit people in those affordable housing units. All right, let's count some vaccines, shall we? We like to do that every night. We're not going to stop. More than 2.5 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose, according to the CDC. And that works out to be 59.3% of the total population. That includes all kids and adults, even kids under 12 who aren't eligible to get the vaccine. We wanted to give you an idea of how much of the state, the total population, is getting vaccinated right now. In Washington, more than 4.72 million people have gotten at least their first dose, according to the CDC. That works out to be a little more than 62% of Washington's entire population. Now, Judy sent me a question about this, the Delta variant. With the Delta variant becoming the predominant variant in some states, what percentage of Oregon cases are this variant? So you are right, Delta, the dominant variant in the U.S., and also just becoming the most common variant in California. So it is spreading very quickly. Scientists say it's more contagious and possibly more severe of a strain of the virus for people who are unvaccinated. We checked with Oregon, and it's a much different story here, believe it or not. To date, the state has only identified 14 cases of COVID caused by the Delta variant specifically, and it only makes up about 5% of all the variants circling in Oregon in recent weeks. But the health authority did tell us that they expect this to go up since that variant is spreading so quickly across the United States and very close to us. We already said California, and in Washington, as at the end of June, they've identified 656 cases of the Delta variant. That made up about 28% of all variants circling in that state. So it is more prevalent in Washington than Oregon right now. But to be clear, if you are vaccinated, you're extremely safe from any of the variants of COVID. But if you're not vaccinated, you are as much in trouble from the Delta variant or any other strain of COVID-19, potentially more with the Delta one, but none of them are great to get. You got us? Right now, less than half of the population in the United States is fully vaccinated. That's why you're seeing headlines like this one, warning about a dangerous fall and the potential for mask mandates to come back because of the Delta variant. Since it's more contagious, health experts say it will really hit unvaccinated populations hard. It's expected to. And there's a lot of parts of the country, including in Oregon and Washington, where there are not a whole lot of people vaccinated. So again, the best way to protect yourself and your family and hopefully avoid more COVID restrictions is to get vaccinated.
True crime fans, this one's for you.
She had a life and someone took that away.
A Vancouver woman is trying to prove that her father is innocent after he was convicted of murdering her mother more than 30 years ago.
I've never had a doubt that I'm going to get the person that killed my mom.
We've got a look at KGW's new podcast, The Yellow Car, when the story continues. I was looking at some of your questions and comments just a moment ago. We'll address a few at the end of the show, including one question about the vaccine lottery. Keep using the hashtag HeyDan and emailing us at thestory@kgw.com. And please consider our Hey Help campaign this week. We're asking you to please donate to the Blanchet House, which helps people living on the streets of Portland. And we know how big of an issue that is in this community. They do incredible work, especially during the heat wave we just had, handing out water and ice to the homeless population. And among other fantastic programs that they offer free meals in downtown Portland. They have some recovery programs with peer support for people wishing to pursue a sober life. So to donate, open the camera on your phone, point it at the QR code on your screen. That'll take you to a link. Or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp.
And it's going to end with me getting the person that killed my mom. It's time.
We have launched a brand new true crime podcast. It's called The Yellow Car. Features the Vancouver woman you saw just there who has spent more than 3 decades trying to prove police arrested the wrong man, basically, for her mother's murder. Ashley Korsland joins us now. She did all the work on this. You wrote it, you did the interviews, you produced this. This is your second podcast now. If you're familiar with Urge to Kill, which was very successful, very compelling, if you ask me. So here we are, your sophomore podcast, and this is one that has really grown into something.
Yeah, we have a pretty solid team after doing the first one, working on this one. And what's been really unique about it is Pune Gray, the woman you saw there. So she has granted our team access to really follow her journey over the last 18 months, almost 2 years now since we started working with her. And what's been really eye-opening for us is that who would have thought during a pandemic, especially, that this past year in 2020 and into 2021, they say they have uncovered some pretty groundbreaking evidence, some DNA evidence that they feel truly will spur investigators to take another look down at this case.
She had a life and someone took that away.
Pune Gray has never been able to let go of what happened on May 1st, 1989, the day her world changed.
I mean, there has not been one day that's gone by since my mom's murder that I haven't thought about her and this case.
As Pune's mother, Effie Antazari, left for work just before 6 that morning, someone approached her in the parking lot of her Vancouver apartment complex and shot her in the head at point-blank range. No witnesses came forward except a neighbor who reported seeing a yellow car slow down, then speed away, close to where Effie was found.
This was a premeditated, highly calculating homicide.
Police arrested Pune's father, Mike Antazari, a Portland Community College professor. Mike and Effie were in the middle of a contentious divorce. He had no alibi during the time of the murder, and police found a gun in Mike's car, the same type that killed Effie. A jury ultimately found Mike guilty of murder. He served 16 years of a 25-year sentence. Mike maintained his innocence until he died in 2019.
It was not a fact-based trial. It was just a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Pune has never believed her father was capable of the murder and thinks the real killer is still out there.
Pune Gray is now offering a big reward to find her mother's killer.
Kind of the path we see forward.
She's spent more than $1 million on this case over the years. She's hired a team of lawyers, private investigators, and forensic examiners to help her prove her theory. They point to a lack of physical evidence against Mike Antazari. Mike didn't drive a yellow car, like the one seen speeding away from the scene, and investigators never found evidence of Effie's blood on Mike's clothing or in the barrel of his gun.
Gunshot is in the category of high velocity type of misting pattern. It creates an aerosol spray that only goes a distance of 3 to 4 feet.
Rod Englert is Pune's forensic consultant. He says Effie's blood was all over her body and should have been on the gun too. But the biggest piece of evidence Pune believes will prove someone else committed the murder is DNA discovered on Effie's clothing years after her murder, thanks to advancements in DNA technology.
There was a mixture. There were multiple individuals' DNA on the sweater and the DNA that was collected.
This is attorney Renee Rothage, who's worked on Pune's case for 18 years.
We've eliminated Mike Antazari significantly. His DNA does not appear anywhere on her sweater and is not in this mixture. And instead, the predominant DNA that we found is from the person who we believe is the shooter. We think we have strong evidence against the shooter, and we hope for an arrest, and then we hope that the shooter then describes what happened and explains why he did it.
In the meantime, Pune and her team await a decision on whether this new DNA evidence will change the outcome of this 32-year-old case.
Do you get worried about not being able to resolve this in your life?
No. I've never had a doubt that I'm going to get the person that killed my mom. I knew it from the beginning. And I told my mom, I kept her at the funeral home. So I saw her every day, and I told her I'm gonna get the person that did that to her, and I am going to. So no, it's gonna end. And it's gonna end with me getting the person that killed my mom.
So this case really started to pick up steam, coincidentally, as you kind of are revisiting it right now. So what are investigators saying at this point?
So that's not much, I will say, at this point. It seems like they are taking another look at this case, at least according to Pune and her team. I have reached out to the Clark County Sheriff's Office. They tell me that they have one detective working the case right now. I have requested to do interviews with them, and so far no one's gotten back to me about doing an official statement or any official interview on this case. And then as far as the Clark County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, that's who will be ultimately making the decision on whether to pursue this or really look into it again. I've called them several times and have not gotten a call back. But according to Pune, she and her team, her attorney, they have had multiple meetings with the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. So we will kind of wait and see what happens here.
You also have this family that's been doing this for 3 decades, trying to keep this case alive. And now here you are drawing so much attention to it. What is their reaction to what might might come of the publicity or the public interest in the case now?
You know, I think they hope that it's going to spur investigators to at least say, look, we need to decide. They've brought some really compelling evidence forward. I think that's their hope is, they're going to say, let's take another look, let's reopen this and see whether we need to pursue other people Pune believes were involved.
Well, very important story to this family specifically. So if you'd like to check it out, episode 1 and 2 of The Yellow Car are available right now wherever you get your podcast. And each week we are going to release a new episode. We also share photos, videos, and much more information about the case at kgw.com/The Yellow Car. In the meantime, keep sending those questions and comments. We're going to read a few when we finish the story right after this. Hey, let's read some comments. Ursula writing in and saying, this armchair quarterback thing isn't working for me. This isn't a football game, as she talks about us critiquing and looking at some of the ways that our officials handled or are talking about the heat-related deaths. Everyone is horrified, she says. Of course, they will try to do better next time. Don't try to make some small local leaders responsible for climate change. That is ridiculous. Yes, that is ridiculous. I'm not blaming any local leaders for climate change. As far as we, of course, will do better next time, there's no guarantee for that. Who's to say these elected leaders will even be the leaders in charge when there is a next time? The idea is to make sure we have an idea in place now, immediately after this incident. And as far as armchair quarterbacking this or blaming someone, there's a difference between blaming someone and holding them responsible. Does that make a difference? Does that make sense to you? We're not blaming anyone. We're just putting responsibility where it belongs, and it's the people who make these decisions and have the true power to make a difference, more than me or more than an average anybody. These are elected leaders who have the potential to get these resources where they need to be. Somebody else, Jimmy, wrote in and said, could you update us on the status of the COVID lottery? I believe they are going to make an announcement tomorrow about who won the $1 million. So that person apparently already knows and is going to be ready for a little photo op with the governor tomorrow and is already, I guess, $1 million richer. So congratulations to them. Can't wait to meet you. As far as the other prizes, the $10,000 prizes, they are yet to announce those. So if you're not sitting at home with your feet up going, hey, that $1 million person's me, cross your fingers. You could still get 10 grand. We'll see what happens. That's the story for tonight. Catch you back here tomorrow.